Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at a study all about pet owner perspectives on virtual veterinary care.
This was published in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association.
Yep, virtual care is something we're seeing more and more of, right? Not just in vet med, but across healthcare in general.
It's definitely a growing trend.
So, in this deep dive, we're trying to figure out, how are pet owners actually feeling about virtual vet visits? Are they excited about this new approach, or are they hesitant?
The study really digs into things like, well, client satisfaction, of course, but also how well people actually stick to the treatment plans and the overall impact on both the pet owner and the veterinarian.
I mean, that makes sense. So before we go any further, can you give us like a quick overview of the study itself? What was its main goal?
So basically, they wanted to see how pet owners were using different communication technologies for vet care.
Okay.
Like, think phone calls or video conferencing or even email. And they also wanted to find out, how pet owners felt about these virtual consultations.
Yeah.
Are they comfortable with this new way of talking to their vets?
Interesting. So who exactly participated in this study? Who did they get information from?
So they had pretty good sample size, over 700 pet owners,
Oh, wow.
mostly from Ontario, Canada.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's get into the findings then. What were some of the key takeaways that you found most interesting or surprising?
Yeah, so one of the things that really stood out was that the vast majority of pet owners, like over 85%, actually still preferred traditional face-to-face vet visits.
Huh, that is kind of surprising. I mean, with virtual care being so popular these days.
Right. It's like you said earlier, it's popping up everywhere.
Yeah. So why do you think that is? Why are pet owners maybe a bit more hesitant to fully embrace virtual vet care?
Well, I think there are a few reasons. First off, there's that super strong bond between people and their pets, and a lot of pet owners want to be physically present during a checkup. It's reassuring.
For sure. They want to be there to comfort their furry friends and make sure they're getting the best care. Plus, seeing your pet examined in person probably gives you more confidence in the diagnosis, right?
Yeah, exactly. It allows for direct observation and interaction, which can be tough to replicate virtually. And from the vet's perspective, there are some challenges too.
Like what?
Well, vets rely a lot on physical exams to figure out what's going on.
Right.
They're looking at how the pet walks, listening to their heart, feeling their abdomen.
Mhm.
It's all crucial information, and it's just not the same trying to do that through a screen.
Makes sense. So there are definitely limitations to virtual care when it comes to replicating that hands-on exam. So the study looked at different ways pet owners were communicating with vets virtually. Did any particular method stand out as being more popular?
Well, the study found that most people who did use virtual options preferred the telephone.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought for sure video calls would be more popular since you can actually see the vet and the pet.
Yeah, I kind of thought so too, but it seems like people just feel more comfortable with phone calls.
I mean, it's definitely more familiar and you don't need any special equipment or anything.
Exactly. No need to worry about internet problems or figuring out how to position your pet in front of a camera. It's about keeping things simple, right? Sometimes that's all you need. But speaking of video conferencing, that's where things got a little more interesting.
Oh, yeah. What did the study find about video calls for vet visits?
Basically, there was a pretty clear divide in how people felt about them.
You mean some people loved them and some people hated them?
Pretty much. Some pet owners thought video conferencing was super helpful.
Yeah.
Being able to actually see the vet, see their pet during the consult.
Right.
It gave them a sense of, reassurance and better communication. But then there were others who ranked video calls as their least favorite option.
So why the difference? Is it just a matter of personal preference or comfort with technology?
I think those definitely play a role, Not everyone's as tech savvy.
Yeah, some people might be intimidated by video calls.
Right. And then you have to think about digital literacy and access, too.
True. Not everyone has reliable internet, especially in more rural areas.
Exactly. So it's something to keep in mind when we're thinking about making virtual care accessible to everyone.
We got to make sure it's inclusive. So besides the tech stuff, I'm curious about how virtual care affects the relationship between the vet and the client. I mean, that's such an important part of vet med.
You're right, it is. And actually, the study found that pet owners felt less confident about communication during virtual consults, especially when it came to building rapport with the vet.
That makes total sense. It's hard to build that connection through a screen.
It is. That face-to-face interaction is important for, picking up on cues and building trust.
So how do we overcome those communication barriers in the virtual world?
Well, one thing the study highlighted was the need for training vets in virtual communication skills.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing how to use the tech.
Right. It's also about adapting their communication style.
Yeah, like what kind of skills would be helpful?
Things like asking the right questions, to get information efficiently,
Oh.
or guiding pet owners through at-home assessments,
Hmm.
and using really clear language to explain diagnoses and treatments.
Makes sense. It's about making pet owners feel heard and understood, even when it's through a screen. Did the study look at anything else that might influence how pet owners feel about virtual care?
They did, and this was a bit of a surprise. Older pet owners were more likely to recommend virtual consults.
Really? I would have thought younger pet owners would be more into it.
Right. You'd think they'd be more comfortable with the technology.
Well, why do you think older pet owners are more open to it?
It could be a few things. Maybe they have more mobility challenges.
So virtual care is more convenient for them.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe they just, see it as a good option for routine checkups.
Interesting. So it sounds like there are a lot of factors at play here. Individual needs, comfort levels.
Definitely. And it shows that we need more research to figure out what's really driving these preferences.
Absolutely. Let's talk more specifically about pet owner concerns with virtual communication. What do they say about that?
One of the main things they worried about was being able to describe their pet's symptoms, accurately during a virtual visit.
Yeah, I get that. It can be hard to put things into words sometimes, especially when it's about your pet.
Yeah. And they were worried that, maybe things would get lost in translation or they might leave out important information.
Understandable. It's not like your pet can tell you what's wrong. Yeah.
Exactly. So they were concerned about misinterpretations or delays in diagnosis because of these communication challenges.
It definitely adds a layer of complexity. Did they mention any specific examples of things they found hard to communicate?
A lot of them talked about the difficulty of describing their pet's behavior or like their physical condition, over a screen.
Yeah, it's one thing to describe a limp or a rash, but what about more subtle things, like changes in energy level or appetite?
Right. Those are harder to explain. And that's where the vet really needs to step in and ask the right questions.
To make sure they're getting all the info they need.
Exactly. Active listening is so important in these virtual consults.
So how can we make this virtual communication better, and build trust between the vet and the pet owner?
Well, the study talked about the importance of clear communication, empathy, just generally making sure everyone's on the same page.
Right, that makes sense. Anything else?
They also suggested using visual aids, like photos or videos.
Oh, that's a good idea. So the vet can actually see what the owner's talking about.
Yep. It can help bridge that gap, between the physical exam and the virtual consult. And shifting gears a bit, the study also touched on how virtual care might impact access to specialized services.
Oh, that's interesting, like seeing a specialist online.
Exactly. It could be huge, especially for people in rural areas or who have trouble getting to a specialist.
That makes sense. It could definitely open up more options for people who need that specialized care.
Right. Imagine being able to consult with a cardiologist or a dermatologist no matter where you live.
Yeah, that would be amazing. No more long drives or expensive trips.
Exactly. It could make specialized care way more accessible. But, there are always two sides to every coin.
So what are some of the potential downsides or concerns with virtual care?
One thing they talked about was the risk of relying too much on it.
You mean like people skipping in-person visits altogether?
Yeah, and that could lead to misdiagnoses or delays in treatment.
Right, because virtual care isn't a replacement for a hands-on exam in every case.
Exactly. So it's important for vets to be clear about the limitations of virtual care.
And to help pet owners understand what an in-person visit is really necessary.
For sure. It's all about that open communication and shared decision-making. Another concern was the potential for fragmentation of care.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if people are using different virtual platforms and maybe talking to multiple vets online, their pet's medical records could get scattered.
Ah, I see. That could make it hard to get a complete picture of the pet's health history.
Right. So the study emphasized the need for better integration between virtual platforms and electronic medical records.
So that everything's in one place,
Yeah,
no matter where the care is happening.
exactly. It's about making sure the care is consistent and coordinated. So looking ahead, where do you see virtual vet care going in the future?
Yeah, what's your prediction?
I think it's definitely here to stay, and it'll just keep getting more integrated into everyday practice.
I mean, it has the potential to really transform how we deliver vet care.
Yeah.
Make it more efficient, more accessible.
For sure. But it's important to do it right.
Right. It's not just about jumping on the tech bandwagon. We need to be thoughtful about how we implement it.
Absolutely. We need to think about ethics, about communication, about making sure we're not losing that personal connection.
It's about keeping the best interests of the pet at heart.
Always. So to wrap up, I think the study gives us a lot to think about.
Yeah, it definitely does. We've seen the potential benefits of virtual vet care, but also some of the challenges. And we've started to imagine what the future might hold.
And we'd love to hear from you, our listeners.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on virtual vet care? How do you see it fitting into your pet's health care?
From Vet Neurojar, keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.